back to the series, How to Win the World with the Rebels. And today we have another fantastic guest. Rachel Jankovich is in the house, I guess to say. We're recording with her to talk about Christian hospitality. And we've already had a ton of laughs talking behind the scenes. So we hope you guys will enjoy this conversation. Nate, tell the people where they can find this series and who we are.
Yeah, so we are the Rebels, and this is the Rebel Podcast for Cultural Engagement. It's a ministry of the Ezra Institute. We're also a part of the Fight, Laugh, Feast network. So you can listen to us, and the place you should be listening to us, though you can find us on any podcast catcher, is the Pub TV app. That's the best way. It's kind of uncancelable, or at least less cancelable than other platforms. And we would encourage you to become a club member. It's the best way to get back to the network, get back to the show, and invest a little bit in Christian content. So as you said, we have a great guest with us today. We're talking about how to win the world. And this whole series is what Christians can be involving themselves, what we ought to prioritize, and what God is pleased to win the world through. And today we're talking about Christian hospitality. And thank you so much for joining us, Rachel.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So anybody who doesn't know Rachel, she's part of the infamous Wilson family from Moscow. And truthfully, most of the guests that we interview, we have to say, from down south. But even though you're in the U.S., you are in the chimney of Idaho, which means you're technically further north than those of us in southwestern Ontario. So
right, don't patronize me saying that. Yeah, we're further north, huh?
That's right.
So this is where we make all the Canadian jokes to her. Be like, do you guys have electricity up there?
Yeah, that's right. We hear that all the time.
So. That's what we get.
So what we want to talk about today, Rachel, is something that I know you've talked about a lot. You've written about a little bit. It's certainly something that both Chris and I, our wives, have greatly benefited from. Just whether it's following sort of the famous Wilson Sabbath dinners, whether it's hearing you on social media talk about this. Something that you've really kind of helped a lot of people think through, and that is this idea of Christian hospitality. So when we say Christian hospitality, as opposed to just hospitality in general, what should we be thinking about when we say that we're talking today about Christian hospitality?
Well, I would say it's obviously hospitality done by Christians. So I don't love, there's a lot of times that people try to parse it all out. Like if it's too beautiful, it's not Christian, or if you're too, you must be being self-glorifying if you set a beautiful table or something like that. And I just dislike that. I think it's people fussing over their own preferences and then trying to say this is the only godly way. So I would say it is obedience. So it's a Christian who's obeying God, offering something to others. So if that could be a moment where you think, you know what, I'm going to knock myself out, make the house beautiful, do a gorgeous thing to bless a friend who's been going through a hard time, that could be a real display of Christian hospitality. Like I bought beautiful flowers. I did all of this. And the same exact event would be not at all Christian hospitality if you were like, I'm going to have these ladies over and they're going to be so jealous and I'm going to, impress them with the things that they can't afford, or that it's the same exact event could be Christian hospitality or not at all. Right. So I would just say it's from the heart, obeying God and offering something to others.
Awesome. It's one of the things that we've noticed, and I know in Moscow you guys have grown a lot over the last little while. And so how important has hospitality been in terms of actually knitting a community of people together?
I'm sure it's very important. But I wouldn't say we can really track that. I feel like the things that I know that have been impactful about hospitality that we have offered, like where I could say, oh, that was a fruit of that hospitality, are the most random, bizarre feedback you get years later from something that you're like, what was that? Like, I don't remember that at all. No clue. So I would say, I know it is, I feel like this is just me kind of sounding fussy every time, but I know it is binding the community together. But I think what's binding the community together is people trying to be obedient together. And it's not like wow, we have all these people from different backgrounds. So I'm going to have them over at my house, and then we'll all just be best friends, and we'll be all in each other's lives, and it'll be amazing. Because it doesn't happen like that. And I would say probably one of the significant surprises for people who move here, knowing it is a hospitable place, is the sheer amount of hospitality, but also the lack of seriousness about it. If I would say that, like, there is a ton of hospitality, but it's not dead earnest times that we're having together, and people don't stay all afternoon. Like it is a fast pace in all kinds of ways. So I would say people come to your house for after church lunch or something, and then maybe just stay a couple hours and then they're gone. It's not like we're finally getting together with Christians. We're going to stay here for the day. I mean, like, we're getting deep. We're going to know everyone's dirt by the end of this afternoon. We're going to share all it. That is just not culturally the way that it is here. So I know it's tying us together. And one of the things that I think people really underrate is that when I said about an obedient Christian offering something being the essence of hospitality, I think what people underrate dramatically is that one of the biggest fruits of hospitality is what it does to the person who's offering it. Like God commands us to do it, not because my neighbor over there will be convicted of something if I have them over, or because they will learn something from me if I do it. It's because I will learn something from God when I'm trying to obey. And it is so formative to the person offering it. It's so riddled with temptations and opportunities to bomb the whole thing. It's like all kind of like, because we want to see some fruit in their life. You know, like, I'm looking for fruit over there. And so I would say, I know it's impacted it, but I would say it's a culture of open-handedness that is wonderful. But in that open-handedness is hospitality, but also not caring that people aren't staying long, not caring if someone who came isn't the most effusive guest you've ever had, or if they didn't really like the food, just letting it all go, just being like, it was for the Lord anyways. I'm not worried about it, you know, like, so yeah, it does shape the community, but I would say it's not a helpful thing to be tracking all the time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really good. I like what you said about it. It's like there's a casualness and a seriousness at the same time of it, like, where it's like,
Yeah.
it's okay and it's great to put on a great spread to do all that stuff, but it's the casual nature of, like, it also doesn't have to be a massive event like every, like, 50 other people.
Yeah.
You can just be like, come over to my house today, and it's like,
Yeah.
because it's the heart condition behind what we're doing,
Totally.
right? And I think we've all been in that situation where somebody's invited us over to their house to show us hospitality or whatever, where they actually and there's like an underlying motive of, like, I really actually just want to have this conversation. I
There
want to
are
get you on my side for this.
attached. Like,
Yes.
I've had you over to lunch, but that means we're best friends now. Like, if you come over, I'm going to get my feelings hurt if you're not inviting me back very quickly, or if you don't want to be hanging out all the time now, or like, I've put this forward and you're not responding. And that's just chaos. And that's why I think it's so important that it is about the person offering it, that you are thinking of your own obedience, and that you're offering it to God and asking Him to distribute it as a blessing to who He will. Like, and that there's no kind of like, now that I fed you, now I'm going to get something out of you. You know, now I'm going to really put the squeeze on in some way. I think, haven't we all had that feeling? It's like, you can feel it in the air, like, oh no, I'm getting obligated to something that I don't want to be obligated to. And that is not hospitality. It's a horrible
Chris and
situation.
I kind of joked that as the church was sort of exploding post COVID, and we just had tons and tons of new people, that as the pastors of the church, we'd often get invited over, and it's sort of like the meal, the plates get put away, and then there's this sort of, the seriousness descends on the group, and then all of a sudden it's like, and here's the question is, so you guys are post millennial? And that was always the thing, right? Yeah.
That's hilarious. We're building up to the awkward question. I think that moment, though, that you're talking about is so repulsive from like, because it is really, this is a joke that we have had, is that the people who are the most effusive, like people that you meet and they have no reason to be acting like you are as close as you are, like where you're just like, we don't actually know each other, like, why are you so, or falling all over themselves to compliment you, or like, on and on and on. So say, are you both pastors? Is that what you said?
We are,
So falling all over your sermon, just like it was incredible and life-giving and whatever, that right then, these are troublemakers. Like it's coming. Like it's coming. Yeah. But the people who are like, I kind of disagree with what you said about this and I'm pushing back, it's like long term, those are going to be your good friends. Like the people that are just so kind of like, I'm not glomming onto you. I don't need you for some desperate need. And consequently, we're not going to have a huge blowout when you're like, you weren't meeting my needs, because that's typically what happens. Is like, I was very needy at the outset and you're not filling my emotional problems. So now I'm going to start a hate blog about you.
Spoken like somebody who's in Moscow.
Yeah. What a hypothetical to pull out of the air there. So one of the things I want to come back to, one of the things you said. So the way you defined hospitality, you said it's people being obedient to God. First and foremost. Yes. So that was one of the questions I was going to ask, is obviously hospitality is listed as one of the spiritual gifts, generally the ones that we put lower on the list that nobody wants. And we have this. So is hospitality a command to everyone, or is it a spiritual gift that's given to some? What are your thoughts on sort of every Christian?
Right. I think I'm like trying to conjure up the verses I'm thinking about, but it's not specific. It's all Christians are supposed to be hospitable. If you're talking about elder qualifications, it's mentioned as absolutely must be hospitable. But every Christian is called to hospitality. That does not mean that they're called to throwing dinners in their home or doing whatever, we are very hospitable in the ways that we are hospitable right now in our life. But when our first when I had 4 kids, 3 and under, maybe we had someone over to dinner or something every 3 months, maybe. I mean, maybe, but it was not because we were not doing what God commanded and being hospitable. It's just that we were being hospitable to our closest neighbors who were in our house with us right here and needed to learn how to sit in a chair and take a bite. And this is who we were loving and sharing God's good gifts with and serving. So it's not like, I don't think hospitality. I think there are people practicing hospitality who are never having anyone over, but are caring for an elderly parent, or practicing hospitality in the way that they are warm and like praying for people in the church, the way that they're looking after the needs of others. So I would not say, I think that the disposition, that when we talked about the heart being right, that you're obeying God from the heart, because you're serving God, there are times when I had a bunch of little kids, I did not feel guilty that we were not inviting people over, because it was so clear what God had assigned to me. Like, it was just manifestly clear. And it wasn't a refusal on our part to share. It was just trying to keep up with what God had already given us to do. And I think even then we knew that what we are working towards, that this is something that we would like to be hospitable in a different way later. But at that time it was like, man, we have a house full of little kids that need a lot of attention and work. And then as our situation has changed, before I just had, our youngest is named Ezra. So before I just had Ezra, my youngest at the time was 7. So we were in a very different phase of hospitality. We were doing a parish discipleship group. So that was a big dinner for a lot of people midweek, like something happening, and then Sabbath dinner. When I got pregnant with him, we were like, we'll wrap this up, right? Like, this is just kind of like, well, we're not doing this right now. Like, it was too extra for our life and me trying to keep up with our other children that we already had. And it's like, I don't feel any guilt about that. Like, God called us off of that particular job right now. And then we pick things back up as we can. We're just moving into a phase of starting to have college kids over, because now I have 2 college students at my house. So it's just always moving along to something else.
That's good.
I love that. I think one of the things with hospitality is that so many people feel so much pressure in terms of like you're describing, like it just looked different when your kids were under 3 and under 5, and it changes in seasons. And it's like, I know, talking to a lot of like women and a lot of men who struggle in this area, it's because they feel so much pressure to be like, oh, we must have a couple over every Friday, we must take people out to lunch after every Sunday. And so they're actually doing it in a way where it's not even from the heart at all. It's checking the box of obedience, like, oh, it's like putting your tithe in, like, oh, I did that, so I'm good, I'm saved by justification today, like, where it's like, hospitality needs to flow out of the abundance of what God's given us. You know what I mean? So,
And also, I think it's not just checking the boxes of hospitality; it's checking someone else's boxes, because what God has given each person is different. So what you need to share is different, and it's funny because people are like, we have to do this particular thing, and that's the only way to show hospitality. It's like, well, that's maybe just how another couple does it. Doesn't mean that that's what you need to do.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I like the emphasis on, you actually described it as hospitality to your own family when you had young kids, right? That you were being hospitable to your kids who are your closest neighbors, and I think that's a really good, at our church, for example, there's a lot of young families, a lot of young kids running around, and I think sometimes when we talk about things like Christian hospitality, particularly moms who with young kids can feel a level of guilt. And I think you just said you didn't feel any guilt. So you're just giving them permission. Don't feel guilty about actually being hospitable to your family.
Totally. And it's just dumb because guilt is the worst motivator in the world anyway. So to get into a like guilt over it is like, you'll never have a fun dinner party if you're doing it because you're trying to not feel guilty. Like, fine, I'll have these people over. I just want to, it's terrible. So I suppose if you sinned in some way, if you know that there was an opportunity the Lord gave you and you were like, I don't want to have that person over, even though I know it is what I'm supposed to do right now. Well, then just confess it and be done. Don't try to dig your way out with a coffee hour or something. Just confess it. Just start over with no guilt.
Yeah, that's good.
I do have to say, I want to bring this up because I love this about hospitality, and I feel like it's another angle that people don't talk about. But what you were saying about people being intimidated by starting or feeling like I have, now I'm distracting myself. People with a lot of little kids, I'm just going to say this at the outset, oftentimes should not be doing what they're doing in hospitality because they're actually neglecting their own children and the discipline of their children, and they're not paying attention. Like, sometimes adults like to get together so that they can hang out and ignore the kids who are basically going feral while they're, and so when our kids were really little, if we were invited to someone's house for dinner, it felt like chaos because I feel like we didn't talk to people. Like, you'd be there, but you're so needing to supervise what's happening with the kids, paying attention to this, following up, spanking people, sorting out what happened in this squabble, who's not eating the food I just told them they had to eat, but left and went to do something else. Like, you're actually not qualified to fellowship with people if you're neglecting this first layer of order in your home and paying attention to your kids. The more kids you have, the less likely you are to be, like, I would just say, don't do it. Don't go out places thinking I'm going to go to this person's house and just relax and fellowship and hang out. And who knows what my kids are doing all over their house, jumping on their bed, doing whatever. And it's just not the way that we ought to be approaching it. So in some ways, it's like, don't think you're qualified to just go hang out when your kids are not qualified to be good guests. Like, you need to be practicing that. But that was a real side. I really got myself distracted to say that. What I was going to say is I love this. It's right in the opening of 2 Corinthians, and it's not talking about hospitality. It's talking about suffering. And it is the verse 3 when it says, Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our tribulation, that we may be able to comfort those who are in any trouble with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. It's this beautiful, like, the mercy we have received is the mercy we give. The comfort we have received is the comfort we give. And even though I would not say hunger is suffering or loneliness is suffering, we can all agree that it can be, and it's a little version. You know what I mean? Like the need to eat or the loneliness or things. These are little. I'm not saying it's like big S suffering, but it is little troubles. And I think that's an important thing with developing your own style of hospitality, is that you start with, how has God comforted me? And how has God shown mercy to me? And that's even super, super practical. Like, does your family love some food? Like, what is the thing that you guys enjoy? Like, what is something that you're always like, yay, this is our favorite? And if you're receiving that as a gift from God, if you're receiving it like this is one of his blessings to us, then it is a joy to share it with others, because it's the comfort that he comforted us with that we get to offer to others. And that's just I think it's a beautiful picture of what hospitality actually is, that we're not offering things we don't understand. We understand it because God gave it to us, and then we have something to extend.
Yeah, that's really good.
Such a beautiful. Yeah, it's such a beautiful picture too, because like that's what God did to us, right? He enjoyed himself, so he shared his son with us, right? Like, and it's like we get to partake in Christ,
Yeah.
which is partaking in him, and it's like out of the abundance of his greatness and his love, he shared that with us. It's just that we ruined it, right? So
And
like, but
interestingly, if you've ever gone to somebody's house for a dinner that they're super excited about, and they're like,
exactly.
this is the best thing ever, you've got to taste this, and you're like, and it actually doesn't even matter if you don't like it. Like, if you taste it and you're like, you guys are crazy, like, I don't know why you think this is the coolest thing that's ever happened, like, this is not my speed, you still end up enjoying the people so much
Yeah.
more, because it is a very clear expression of their own rightness with God. Like, when they're like stoked about, you have got to eat this deep fried Oreo or something that you're like, I mean, I don't know, I haven't had one of
Oh,
those,
yeah.
but I'm just saying, it could be something that's totally not your own.
Yeah.
It's not your own wheelhouse, and yet you still enjoy them, and the fellowship is way better when they're expressing their own enjoyment of something God has given them.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you could, like, a good first step for people who are struggling with this would be just whatever you're passionate about, whatever you're getting super into, just invite somebody along with you. Like, so
Totally. And not, it doesn't have to be fancy. It's like,
yeah,
it can be, I mean, I don't know, but it does not have to be like we're starting with our most elite menu. It's like, we actually love pizza night as a family, or we love, something that's very accessible, but
yeah,
you're willing to share it because God shared it with you and you enjoy it. So you're like, well, let's share it. It's a
that's
great place
awesome.
to start.
When you frame it like that too, because I think one of the things that I was just reading rereading The Things of Earth that Dr. Joe Rigney wrote a while ago, and talking about enjoying the things that God has given to us and seeing him as the ultimate provider and all this. And when you talk about hospitality in that way, it's sort of like it's a discipleship tool along with just an obedience. Yeah, it's open-handed obedience, but it's also a discipleship tool. You're teaching first and foremost your family how to enjoy the things of earth, how to receive God's gifts as a good gift from God, and then you're discipling others just through how you view the things that you're enjoying together with them.
Yes.
One of the questions I would have, so you were talking about having kids and sort of the various stages of things. Talk maybe a little bit about how you have tried to disciple your kids to enjoy hospitality. It's what has it done for your family, being a family that tries to be hospitable in various ways? But what are some of the familial benefits in teaching your kids and them growing up in a hospitable family?
I would say, just back to what I said, that it shapes the givers. Hospitality shapes the people who are giving. I would say practicing hospitality with a lot of children in your home in various phases of growth is is the same thing. It's shaping them in choosing, like, there will be a lot about, you can't be a big family like ours and have a lot of people in your house as often as we do that requires the help and effort of all the kids, without that bringing up all manner of everyone's spiritual, like everyone's, I'm not in the mood to deal with this. So I would say some of the best, really the best, is an understanding, I think, a better insight into your own flesh, the small foxes that spoil the vineyard, the little things that can distract you from what you need to be doing. And also that they have an opportunity to observe other people behaving in ways that where you learn very firsthand how that is not considerate, or that is not the way that I like. There, it is a great way to learn a lot of things that are not the point of it by any means, but it definitely shapes their understanding of people and the gospel and what it means to give and what it means to lay your own life down in little petty things where you didn't really want to do this right now, or you didn't, whatever. But I feel like it started, for me, this is how all of mothering has been. I think it's probably just how all of the Christian life is, but mothering magnifies that. It turns your attitude, plugs your attitude into an amplifier. And all of a sudden, we all hear it if mom is not doing a great job. The whole house knows. I remember the first times, like where you're trying to quickly, like as our kids were old enough for us to have big groups over, it is like going out in your backyard to flip over all the rocks to see what yucky things you can find in your own heart. Like as you're hustling around trying to get ready for something, the temptation to bark at your own children because we're trying to get ready for the guests, like we don't want people to see our house a mess. So I'm going to make it a mess in our hearts. I'm going to do this. I'm going to make a mess right now. I'm going to indulge myself in, and it was, I would say, you build up muscles at that kind of thing to recognize it coming on earlier and to be like, this is not worth it. It would be better to have everyone show up to our house being a mess and me be embarrassed of that than to have me be even short with one of my children for even a second about it. Like just, we've got to, and I have a friend who is far more worried actually about general house cleanness than I am. Far more stressed out, I would say. Probably a little OCD is actually what I'm saying. But she was like compulsively cleaning her house all the time and being very short with her kids because she's like, what will happen if someone comes to the front door and sees this? Like, what if they see the mess that was left in the living room? And when I was talking to her, I was just like, you do know that Jesus is already there. Your guest is already here. He's in the house. He's watching you. He's watching you lose it with your kids to try to get ready for someone who's way less important than he is, like way less important. And you're like, well, he doesn't matter because he can always see what I'm doing. But either way, I had talked with her about that, and I had some opportunity. I mean, this is years ago now, some opportunity where the pressure was building, the chaos was building. People are starting to arrive, but things are not. And I clearly, it was mostly just that I wasn't, my heart was not right about it. Whatever it was the stress of silly, stupid stuff. And I remember it struck me all of a sudden, like, Lord, you be my guest. Like, Lord, be my guest. This home that's who we're inviting here. Doesn't matter when other people get here. He's already here. Why don't I act like it? Why don't I act like he's the one who's already here watching this? And it was such a great, that has become a real go-to hospitality prayer for me is, Lord, be my guest. And for like, I'm just not gonna, this other stuff, I'll do what I can do, but just offer it to God and not worry about it.
Yeah, that's really good. Awesome. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I was just going to say, it's funny how often we commit the greater sin, like by the way we speak to our kids or our spouse, to cover up the lesser sin of I've got some dust bunnies in the corner or whatnot, or my laundry's not folded or whatever scenario that is. But it's like what you're saying is like, it's actually almost like a rebuke to everybody, because we always forget that the sovereign, omnipresent Lord is already in the home. Like, so like If anything, he's the one we're offending. Like, so that's so good. What a great reminder. We should write that on our wall.
It's
Like, so
thinking that you're getting ready for the moment where God is going to view your work. Sort of
yeah,
like I'm not a living sacrifice. I'm getting a little something ready. I'll leave on the altar. Like
Right.
it's not how I'm doing this. He's going to be so impressed when I just have the buffet ready. That I'll give to him. But
Yeah, don't
none
peek
of this
early.
towards
yeah,
it. None of that has to be offered to God. But I would say, in terms of why I think obedient hospitality shapes the doers of it, it is this. This is a training regime for your own heart and obedience in a million tiny little temptations to get kind of in a swizzle before people get in a mood with those around you or get into it, whatever is happening. And I just think it is such a gift to those who are practicing hospitality to have these opportunities to just over and over and over give it to God. Like, just be like, this is for you, Lord, not for the person. And to loop it around to what we're talking about earlier, if you've been doing that, when the guest actually arrives, there's not going to be all these strings attached. The whole thing has been offered to God all the way along, so that when they come, you're like, if he's pleased, that's really all I'm looking for. Like, I'm not, it's fine. I hope you enjoy it, but I don't really care on a fundamental level if you enjoy it or not, because it wasn't primarily about you. It was about this work that glorifies God.
I
that's awesome.
want you to enjoy it, but I don't need you to enjoy it, right? That's
Right.
major
And
difference.
and the reality is that freedom makes it infinitely more enjoyable. That freedom
Yeah.
that it's not all riding on how you feel the meal tastes or how it's just great.
Yeah. Um, so one of the things that as you're talking about, even just in terms of the conversation we're having, we're laughing. I think there's something that's beautiful about, and obviously you guys experience it. You guys have lots of kids, and you have lots of nieces and nephews, and they have lots of cousins, and your church is full of life, as is ours. And so a lot of times these these open-handed doing life together encounters, they can be kind of messy in that regard. I mean, I totally relate. We're there right now where we go over and somebody, I'm sure they invite us over to get to know the pastor, and I'm just spanking one of my kids in their bathroom, and
I came to your house, but I'm busy. Like,
yeah, and so there is this sort of like this chaos, but chaos can be a beautiful thing and it can be a really ugly thing. And so maybe
yeah.
like talk a little bit about what's the kind of chaos we're shooting for. What's the difference between chaos that glorifies God and maybe the chaos in the home that dishonors God?
Right. So there's a certain kind of chaos that goes along with fruitfulness that is it's just people need to get over it. Like, it just is the way it is, that kids make noise, that they'll drop things, that they're like, so I'm not talking about things that's like sticky fingers on the table or things that, like stuff like that to me is, that's just fruitfulness. It's like, it's different because fruitfulness is just not the same thing as some kind of like productivity system,
Mm,
like it's not like a little, oh, look what I'm getting done so cleanly and in such an organized manner, but it's actually just a whole lot of, well, it's like a compost pile or a garden. It's like there's tons of things happening here, there's tons, but it is going towards good things. The kinds of chaos that I would say is bad is any, obviously, undisciplined so people who are not familiar with happy, well-disciplined children often think of discipline as being what happens if they knock their milk over or if they made a mistake of some kind that is just normal childish behavior. And I would hope that would never be a point of conflict or you know what I mean? That like, what have you done? I'm so upset with you. I would hope that would never happen. For us, the kinds of chaos that I would say is beyond what is seemly, when you're like, this is bad, is any kind of disobedience from the, like if the kids are disobeying or if the mom is like, no, I don't want you to do that right now. So things you may see in hospitality kinds of moments would be like a mom talking to you and her 5-year-old son pounding on her legs, being like, mom, I want to, give me a cookie. And her being like, trying to kind of pat his head and act like this is like, I'm trying to talk to you, but I'm not listening to my son. And he's actually behaving very badly. Like he's starting to be like shoving on his mom, like, listen to me, doing whatever. And she's just trying to carry on without doing it. So that kind of thing, I would say, that's just chaos that shouldn't be happening. It's the kind of chaos that you just be able to say, excuse me a minute. Like, let me talk to my son privately for a moment, and then we will carry on with our conversation. But when our kids were little, because we had so many of them, it was a thing. That was a time that we fondly refer to as the sweaty eyeball phase. Like, so chaotic that it was just like, wow. In that phase, I feel like we didn't ever have a conversation straight through with anyone. We never sat through a church service straight through a church service ever. And I can remember sometime we were worship in a gym, and so the parenting room was like down the stairs off in the other building. And I can remember passing my husband in the hall where he had the two toddlers that he was walking with them back from the father's room, and I was holding the toddlers. And they were all toddlers. They were all babies and toddlers. And it was so funny because it was like, wait, you're not in church either. Like we came as a family to church to hang out in the other building. Like we were all down there. And, but we joked and we were like, this is just our part of the liturgy. Our part of the liturgy is doing the work to bring worshipers to worship. And the fact that is chaotic, and you're not going to sit here and feel like, wow, I've been so encouraged and so fed. It's like, but we're doing our duty before the Lord, right? That is encouraging. And it's encouraging because he blesses it, because it's absolutely what pleases him. So there was no kind of, and I think hospitality is the same way. If you have a bunch of little kids, don't go anywhere thinking I'm going to have a great relaxing time right now. Like this is me time. Like it's not like that, but God does give you that encouragement and that rest that you need. It's just often in other places, but it's because you're pleasing him. It's because you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. But I would say I'm out of that phase in the sense that if I need to speak to a kid, it is very rarely, like it used to be, the majority of the kids could all be being bad. Now I feel like you might just need to quickly say something to someone and then you're back to normal. But when we have parents with little kids around, I would just say, oh, go deal with that. And I'll be here when you're done. Be easy to interrupt is a way of showing hospitality to parents of little kids. Like just being like, please, by all means, go handle that. Well,
yeah. And I think that one thing that it just, again, in the stage that I'm personally in the stage that our church is in, I just want to press in on this a little bit. I know there might be some listeners who this isn't as relevant to, but I think this is so important. So being interruptible, understanding the people that you're either inviting into your home or the people whose home you're going into, understanding the stage that they're in. And one of the other things I would say that's so hospitable that I never really thought about until I had young kids is the way people interact with your children can be hospitable or inhospitable, right? Like, do they just ignore your kids and they're just there to talk to you, or do they treat your kids like actual little human beings? And that's such a small piece, but such an important piece.
Yeah, and some people are just really, really more intuitively better at that than
for sure
others. Like where you're like, that is actually just, you're very gifted at making these kids feel like something super special is happening at your house. Like welcome. I'm feeling a little bit like I've arrived because my kids have outgrown enough. I've saved some toys because I thought I was going to be a grandma next, not have another baby. But there are some little boys that when they come to my house, they're like, run over to the cupboard where they know there are play ships. Like, can I get them out? And I always feel like, yes. I have a cupboard of toys and you know where it is. It's just, that's fun. But when our kids were all little and the cousins were little, one of the things that we did that I think is wonderful this is a bigger picture thing, but I would just encourage people who are listening to this whoever they are, to consider how you might do something sort of like this. We had so many little kids at the same time that a lot of the times it would be the kids are going to sit at the table and the adults will be eating around in other places. My husband usually cut the meat, but almost all the time we would have a full bowl, like a serving bowl of bite-sized, like the meat has already been cut up for the children, because there were enough kids that couldn't cut their own food that we would actually serve it already cut that way. But it was the dads that served the kids. Like, so it was a table full of kids, but it was always the dads getting them settled, serving their food, going around. And that has I'm not saying they were super calm, because it was not super calm, but it is a really good thing to have fathers, because so often it's the women doing the food prep, to have fathers actively engaged in the corralling the kids and putting the food on the plates and paying attention to what's happening. It lends a good ballast to the children's table, a good kind of like, we're gonna all behave here. We're gonna all, like, the dads are on the job, it's great that way. So if you have that kind of situation, I recommend it a lot, to have the dads very involved in serving the kids food.
That's really good.
That's great. I back a little bit ago, you were talking about like people interacting with your kids and how people do that, and it's always funny how hospitality can also be something you display when somebody's being hospitable to you. So like obviously talk to their kids, treat them like adults, but you can always there's always those people who they're just there to have their agenda and their conversation with you, and so like it's like the kids interrupting, they don't give you the opportunity to go and go deal with that. You know what I mean? So like you can show hospitality even when it's like you're in somebody else's home, to be like, can I, like, it seems like a lot is happening now. Do you want me just to leave? Like, because I don't actually have an agenda. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I'm
just here to absorb your family, and like we're here to hang out. If you need me to leave, I'll leave. You know what I mean? Like, I can take the dog for a walk, whatever. So I just really love the almost like the pressure off of this conversation, in terms of like, there doesn't have to be this big thing to do. It's just do your life with others. Like,
and do what you need to do manifestly right now, which you're ignoring. And I also happen to see that you're not doing your job right now, which makes me complicit if I'm sitting here while you're, doing it. That's a tip I give mothers that nobody likes. This is one of my tips that is universally rejected, but I keep giving it to people.
I love it.
When you are with a friend or with someone and their child is disobeying and being very bad, everything in you wants to not look. Like, you pretend you can't see what's happening. Do you know what I mean? Like, everybody wants to just be like, let me give you a moment of privacy to pretend that you're doing what you ought to be doing here. Like even though you are actually right there, like you are actually a witness to the crime, like you're sitting right there when her son says, I hate you. You never let me do whatever. And she's like, why don't you go get a popsicle? Like you're actually sitting right there, but you're like, don't look. And everyone wants to not look because it's just terribly embarrassing. It's like you got just put there. And my tip that no one takes, that I keep pushing anyways, is don't look away. Watch if that happens right in front of you, just watch it happen. And when the child goes away, whatever, then say, is that how you usually handle it when he does this? Like, is this how it's normally going? Like, clearly the Lord put me here in this moment to talk to you about how that is not the way forward. Like, this is not the way of life. This is a bad idea. But it's uncomfortable. And that's the kind of thing can really happen in hospitality moments, because you've been invited into a place where all of a sudden you may see things that you kind of wish you were not seeing. Right? Like, I've been invited into a place where now I see that, mom is yelling at the kids, like now I see that something that's really not great is happening here. And what it does is give you a moral obligation to not ignore that. And I don't mean that you go in like you're Wyatt Earp, I'm here to fix all of the problems, but God put you there to see it. And you can't pretend that you can't ignore it. Like you may say, okay, I'm going to pray about that and ask the Lord if he wants me to say something, give me an opportunity. ask about it or to say something. But what you can't do is pretend it never happened. Like, because especially in mom groups, there is a tendency to be like it's like real open secrets. You know what I mean? Like, it's open secrets that child is terrible and that this mom is wildly indulgent in this, but nobody would want to say it out loud. Like, you clearly are struggling. Would you be up for talking about it? I don't know how that really pertains to hospitality other than the uncomfortable truth of things that might happen when you get into hospitable moments.
This is good because it's actually the conversation's gone in a way that I didn't expect. So there you go. That's a good thing.
Hey.
But I think as well, like, I'm almost thinking through the conversation as it's unfolded is kind of showing that part of Christian hospitality is actually encouraging one another towards faithfulness, right?
Yes,
in
absolutely.
sometimes very messy situations. So it's like you have opportunities to cultivate faithfulness, whether it's, not losing it on your kids while you're getting ready for the guests to arrive, or in those moments, displaying discipline, proper order, like putting things in the proper order so that you're not putting, your guests' comfort above your duty as a parent to discipline disobedient children. So it's almost this idea that you're practicing and displaying and being accountable for faithfulness with others around. And that's a sort of angle of hospitality I've never thought about before.
I would say, less people who are listening think that when we have people to our house, it's one giant confrontation is happening the whole time. It really isn't. Like, that's very rare. That is a very rare thing that you really have to do that. And a lot of the time I would say you don't write checks until you know you have the money in the bank. Like, if you have a new family over and their kids are outrageous, I would not say anything to them unless it was clear that they were looking for feedback, unless it was clear that they were like, we're desperate, we need help. Otherwise, I would say we need to cultivate getting to know them to a point that we could be of any use. Right now, it would be not at all profitable. Like, right now, it's just time for me to be open-handed, glad to bless them, hope the Lord uses it, and I'm not here to critique everything. So I would really not do that unless it was you had a relationship with the people. So I'm just getting that out there to say, I'm talking about you're with good friends, seeing something go down that should not be going down. Not so much just, hi, I just met you, but I'd like to tell you that
welcome to the church. Let me fix your family.
Yeah, here's my list of grievances. So
I have problems.
That's great. I think that's partly why, like, what we're talking about, it's hospitality, but it can also be sanctification. Like, because one for us, we look under the rock, so to speak, and see all the areas that, like, we're failing in these areas. But also in terms of just the way we deal with each other creates a tight knit family. Because, like, I think of, like, when you have your brother-in-law or your sister-in-law over, it's a lot more comfortable to probably chime into, like, are you going to let that go with your kid than it would be with a new person. But, like, in the church, we're trying to cultivate that family atmosphere with many, many people who aren't blood family. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what actually makes us anti-fragile, woke agenda or whatever, because we've created a Christian culture that's stronger than the bonds of, like, neighbor. You know what I mean? It's stronger than the bonds of, like, I've had dinner with that guy one time. You know what I mean? Because I've actually helped that person with parenting. I've helped that person with the laundry. Sure. You know what I mean? Like, whatever the scenario is. So that's really good. So
sort of the picture is you pull your car into the mechanic shop and lift the hood. They see everything under the hood, and that's sort of what bringing people into your home is. So it's that's good.
It is for sure.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it's a great big opportunity to either be a faithful, not hypocrite, or an unfaithful hypocrite. Like you think if people are really going to see the way it functions, let it be the way that it functions, be a way that honors God. And that is different. That is different than let's make it look like, what can we do to make it look like we're doing okay before people come over?
So just to kind of tie a bow on the conversation here, I want to end with sort of a big idea.
Sure.
And that is to kind of get to let's connect this conversation a little bit to the big idea of this series. So how is it then that the kind of relationships, the kind of hospitality, the kind of doing life together, the kind of community that we're talking about, how is it that God uses that to advance his kingdom and win the world?
It's just the way that he always does it. But what I was saying earlier about how it changes the person who's offering hospitality, and what we were talking about, the whole preparation, the work of it, the giving, everything is something that you actually can only do rightly in the presence of God and with the Holy Spirit enabling you to do that rightly, which means how can it not be a great witness? How can it not, like any Christian full of the Holy Spirit, walking with God and offering things to him, is going to be it is advancing the gospel. What's unique about hospitality is that it's a thing that is happening at a moment that other people can come and taste and see and partake of that. Like they can enjoy. The difference between when you walk into a room where people have been arguing, even if you didn't hear them arguing, and you don't even know what is it, everyone stops talking as soon as you don't even know. How do I know in the atmosphere that things are not good right now, like that? Or if people are trying, but if you walk into a room where people are just joyfully in fellowship, it is actually an atmospheric, like you feel it, that it is that way. It's a thing that we can all tell. It's like another language that we actually speak. And so if that's what you're doing and you're offering it to God, and people get to come into your home at a time when a lot of believers are walking with God and enjoying God's gifts, it's very persuasive, right? It's an invitation to something that is better than, if it's an unbeliever, it's an invitation to something that is better than they have ever experienced. When it's a believer, it's an encouragement on the way. It's like, oh yeah, these are my people. This is a foretaste of something really glorious. We have, in August with the Grace Agenda, we do a block party downtown, and that has been hilarious. It's all free food, but it is tons of food, and it is good food. And then it'll be like, anyone's welcome to come. It's like 3,000 people, 2,500 to 3,000 people. And we have all of the kids. It's like teenagers and kids with food on trays, offering it to people in the streets. Like, can I offer you, meatballs or pizza or like that? And it's just like, it's very crazy. There's sometimes in my life, you practice some kinds of hospitality that are so outrageous that actually people come up to you and say, can I just ask you, what is the reason for the hope that is in you? And you're like, wow. You're like, that's like word for word, because it's just like, what's going on here? Like, what is this? Like, what is this thing that I'm tasting, that I'm seeing, that's happening here? But for the believers to enjoy that kind of thing is a huge encouragement. And so many believers are like, this is a foretaste of heaven. This is my people. This is my home. This is my, like, it gives them a real kind of shot in the arm joy. And to unbelievers, they're just like, someone explain to me, what is this? Like, what is happening here? Like, I got swept up in this moment, and we'll have these, a Muslim family sitting there just having a little feast in the middle of it. Like, what's going on? And I love that. But I think I guess I would say, how could hospitality not change the world when it is expressing this fundamental relationship of God and his children, and a joy and rightness in that?
Awesome.
I'm just picturing people turning like, what must I do to be saved?
The first time that ever happened, I was like, what did you just say? Like, I was like, wow. I did not see that coming. Like, it seems like typically you want to go around saying, like, can I tell you about the hope that you're not asking me about? Like, you haven't seen anything. You've seen nothing that led you to believe I have something you don't have. But hospitality is just very, very, it's almost an immediate thing. Can I offer you a coffee? And it's like, why would you do that? Why would you care to do, it's an immediate thing.
And
Yeah.
the amazing thing hospitality is one of the things we can all do. Like,
Yeah.
you don't have to be like, rich. You don't have to be like, poor people can do it. Rich people can do it. Introverts can do it. Extroverts can do it. Whatever scenario, there's like the way we've talked about it here. It's just obedience, and you can do it in any aspect of life. Like,
Totally.
so it's such a beautiful picture. And then you'll get asked the question. So that'd be awesome.
You will. You will. We used to do a thing at the park where we would, I would bring lunch for a ton of kids, and we'd bring iced coffees for moms, and then moms would bring salads or like mom food to enjoy. Like, it was a mom food potluck with iced coffees and then like hot dogs for all the kids or stuff like that. But whoever was in the park, we would just invite to join us. Like, we would all show up and just be like, hey, do you guys want to eat with us? Come. And that was it was in those lunch in the park times. That was the first time that I started having women ask me that. Like, who are you? And it was so funny. How do you all know each other? I'm like, we're all Christians. It was like, do you go to the same church? No. Like, it's just a bunch of Christian women at the park asking you if you'd like to eat our food. And it was so great.
That's awesome.
That's
Well,
amazing.
yeah, thanks so much for this conversation. Why don't you just let our people know about, so you've authored a few books. I know Loving the Little Years was one that was incredibly helpful to my wife. You Who is one of your more recent books. You have a podcast that you do, What Have You, Mason Jar. Tell people where they can find you.
I suppose Canon Press. I am on Instagram, but I don't post all that often right now. Now that I have Ezra, I am busy at home, not feeling guilty about not being hospitable on Instagram. That's what I'm doing. But I will post on Instagram time. Canon Press has most of, I think they publish all my books. I think they have past webinars and things on the app. So Canon is probably the best place to find me.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
All right. Well, thanks so much for this once again. And all of our listeners, I hope you enjoyed this. Go check out more of Rachel's content on Canon Plus. And until next time, go be hospitable and win the world.